and love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.
Welcome to the Let's Get Naked podcast. Today I'm getting naked with Perri Chase. Perri is a teacher of feminine spirituality and energetic law. She teaches a pussy stroking meditation called SXBMB as part of a larger framework called the Pussy Map. Welcome, Perri. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start by you just maybe giving me a 30,000-foot view of who you are. And, then we can kind of dive into individual pieces of that, but maybe just anything about, over the course of your life or your business career or kind of how you got to where you are today. Just like I said, the 30,000-foot view, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well... Just nice and specific.
Yeah.
No, actually, it's a good question. And I would, interestingly enough, for the name of the podcast, I would say that I am where I am today through the process of continuously getting naked.
Nice, and it fits.
Like I feel, and maybe a little bit in the literal sense, but like really from I feel like the path of awakening and spirituality and all of that I'm part of is, or that I live, right? It's my whole life, is the constant allowing yourself to be like disrobed by the universe, where we're layer by layer and like, you think you're one thing and then whoops, no, you're not. And then, just like, everything just keeps coming off.
Yeah.
And so if I had to sum up 30,000-foot view, it's just more of, the becoming more of who you are through the unbecoming.
Yeah. Yeah. When did that start for you? Like was there a pivotal moment where you feel like you were really ready to dive into the work that you do, the unbecoming, the onion peeling back? Like when was that for you?
So it's interesting that you talk about ready because I don't think we're ever really ready. I think what's happened is it's become more popular. Like it's become like a socially, culturally popular thing because there is really a mass awakening going on. I would say there have been a couple of points in my life where there have been those different awakenings, but the big one that really changed everything was in 2008, I was living in Hong Kong. I was a headhunter on Wall Street, so financial services. I had moved out to Hong Kong to co-run the companies that I worked for's office in Hong Kong. Huge opportunity at my age. I was kind of being groomed to be a partner of the firm. I was making over $1 million a year. Like I was crushing it.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was, I think that a lot of times, and I'm just going to kind of drive around a little bit to like bring you back. I think that a lot of times what happens, I think this especially to women, is that like we're given this goal of, when you get there, just keep working, just keep doing that thing. You'll get there someday. You'll break that glass ceiling. Well, I was like a bull in a china shop, and I was like, I'm going to break that fucking ceiling like right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I did it so fast that I was like, this is it. Like this is, where the fuck is my happiness?
Yeah.
Like you told me that if I did X, Y, and Z, that I would have it. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to go to Bali a lot when I was living in Hong Kong. My boss who sent me out there had a house there, so he let me go use the house. And I remember doing a conference call on the beach in Bali and saying, wow, like people would kill for this life that I have. And I'm miserable. And not so long after that, like I actually went on a vacation to Bali by myself. I had started doing yoga because I was like, something has to change. Like, headhunting, oh my God. It's just like, you work all day and then you're drinking at night and you're out with people. I'm like, this lifestyle just isn't working. Like, I've got to change something. And so, it started with yoga. And I think I read The Secret. Like, I'm just telling you, like, I wasn't like a spiritual seeker.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I really had no basis for spirituality. I did not grow up religious, like any of that. And so, I was in Bali. I had also been reading Eat, Pray, Love. So I had this moment of like, maybe I should go look for Ketut.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the little mystic man in the mountains.
Yes.
And I just kind of, you know, I was trying to like find something. And what happened when I moved to Hong Kong too was that life became Groundhog's Day. Like it was like I was in this repetitive cycle loop. Like it just felt like I was like, one day became the next, and I was like, is this it?
Yeah, that's the rinse, lather, repeat that I refer to, because it is just, it's like, is that, you get to a point of, is this it? Is this everything? Is this as good as it gets?
So I don't know how this happened, but in that time I had this magnet on my refrigerator and it said, just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, it became a butterfly. And I swear to God, it was like an Easter egg in the game. You know, like it just was like there. And I just always like tuned into this magnet, and it was like some future version of myself went and put it there or something. But anyway, I'm back in Bali on a vacation, and I made a choice to either go to yoga or go for a cocktail. And I chose the cocktail, and I ended up at the bar watching sunset. And there were a couple of girls who had been there from Canada, and we started talking. And they were like, "Oh, I wonder if you know my yoga teacher or my friend. You know, he was my partner. We owned a yoga studio together. He lives in Hong Kong." I'm like,
Right.
I'm sure we don't. And she's like, and she said my yoga teacher. And so all of a sudden I'm like, what? I'm like, I can't believe that's so random, really random. I thought they were there for a yoga retreat, but they weren't. They were there for like a spiritual retreat, which again, I didn't know what this was. Anyway, they're like, you have to come meet this guy. So ultimately, this was like an enlightened master, incredible teacher. The first thing he says to me was, he looks at me, he's like wearing all white, but he's like wearing jeans, you know, like white jeans and, you know, a tunic, and he's like smoking a cigarette, and he just kind of like looks at me, and he's like, you know what your problem is? He's like, you manifest everything you don't want. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. I mean, I was really able to manifest all of these things. But did I want them?
Right.
So they convinced me to spend this week. You know, I'm in Bali. I'm like, all I want to do is be at the beach. And they're like, come and sit with him and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh. I'm like, can I do this workbook by the pool? Like, I thought it, the whole thing. They're like, you don't understand where you are. They're like, you don't understand the opportunity that this is, or who he is, or like what you've been given here. And and he was like, you're meant to be here. So they just invited me into this retreat. It was never happened before. It was so weird.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this like workbook of like unwinding things, and I get to this place where I just saw that literally like everything that I had built was like for the approval of like my dad or my boss, or, you know, just like, you know, am I the good girl? Am I doing it right? Am I kicking ass? Am I the best? You know? And then it was like the house of cards, like the one card came out and I could see it all. And I'm the kind of person who, like, once something like that happens, there's no going back.
Yes, you can't unsee that.
So I left Bali on a Sunday. I called my boss in New York on a Monday, and I was like, I'm done. And he was like, done with what? And I was like, I'm done with headhunting. And he just couldn't believe me. He was like, what do you mean? He's like, take a sabbatical. The market's shit. This is 2008.
Sure.
And he's like, take a sabbatical. And I was like, you know, I'm just done. Yeah. And so I gave him like a month, and, you know, tried to give as much of my intellectual property as possible to them. And, you know, but I was like, I need to go. So I had money in the bank, thank God. But, you know, I basically spent the next 2 years completely coming undone. like in the dark, alone. Like, you know, I spent some time in Thailand scuba diving to try and like make sure I wasn't like at the bar every night. You know, I had to get up in the morning and like do something. But it was dark time.
Yeah.
Like there were periods of it, and I like had this relationship with money back then too, where I associated my success and my wealth with like being unhappy. So I like pissed my money away, and like in this, like I pushed it away,
Like defiant kind
yeah,
of. Yeah.
Like I don't care. I'm just gonna spend it.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got like, you know, 2010, and I was ready to go home, I had like my Rolex. That was like my last thing. And I was like, okay, I can always sell my Rolex to get home.
Yeah.
But I like managed to kind of make a little bit of money. But I spent 2 years not working.
Yeah.
You know, and I really lost my identity because I didn't know who I was without my job. You know, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it was a really, like, it's the kind of undoing that like I take people through now that I would never recommend that people go through alone. You know, like it's just dark and you forget where you are.
Well, it's like the wool was pulled off of your eyes so that you can actually understand that we were dealt, I think, a lot of times is like, okay, if you get this amazing job, you're going to be happy. Or for some people, it's if you get married and you're 2.4 kids, you're going to be happy. Or, you know, I also measured success by money. That was my previous,
Totally.
you know, my
And
previous.
money's great.
It
Like,
is,
don't
but,
get me wrong.
But when you really put so much emphasis on that's the measure of success, I think that's not healthy either.
No.
You know, so when you get to these things that we were kind of programmed with out of the box, is how I feel about it, and you're not happy, it's like, what the fuck? Because I've done all of the things, right? You're crushing it, like you said. I'm at this place where I've done it. I've broken the ceiling. I've done all of the things.
And I was so good
and I'm
at
miserable.
it.
Exactly, right? So I find that to be very similar in that I got to this place where I had all of these successes, right? I drove the fancy car. I had this beautiful house, like all of the things. And I'm like, I've never been more miserable because I was just doing the rinse, lather, repeat bullshit.
I think this is a really big story for so many people.
Yeah.
But, you know, our culture doesn't, like, I don't know that if I had been in New York, if I could have done it, if I could have pulled the trigger, because the culture that we live in is so about productivity and functionality, which is, you know, in my teachings, like those are masculine qualities, not necessarily about male, female.
Sure.
This is just about like the energetics of masculine and feminine. And we really value that productive, logic, data-oriented, you know, structured, linear, task checking, you know, and we don't value, and you can just see it in society, like we don't value the creative the same way, right? And so it diminishes and minimizes that. And so I don't know that I could have ever had an awakening like that living in New York City.
Yeah.
And so it was what it was. And I also think that I needed to go, like I needed to be that far out because I'm a very experiential learner, but I'm also now as a teacher, because like, I mean, who obviously, you know, I believe that our souls kind of have a plan of like what we're supposed to be doing in our life. And the more we surrender to that, it unfolds. But that preparation to actually be able to take people through like what I call the gate of surrender, which is like, you know, where you don't know actually how you're going to figure it out. And you have to let go of the trapeze and trust. And so that was important for me to have gone through that because you really can't take people places that you have not been.
Right. Well, and being willing to surrender is crazy. Like there's no way to explain that to someone that hasn't.
No.
You know?
No. And because they well, I try often. And they're always like, what do I do, Perri?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's actually the not doing.
Yes.
And it's an opening, right? And so it really, a lot of people don't surrender until they have like a lot of compression, right? Like something where they feel like there's no wiggle room and they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that is why so many people attract, big catastrophic things in their lives, because it's like, it's like you're not going to pay attention unless it's like that significant.
Yeah. Well, and I think the universe keeps telling you the lessons that you need to learn, and it just keeps knocking louder if you're not listening.
That's
right.
true.
And so that's why it's like when it actually does, it's
100%
a big catastrophic thing, because it's like, no, seriously, I tried to point it out to you here and here and here and here, and it just got a little bit louder, a little bit louder, a little bit louder until you actually open your eyes.
Well, and this is one of the things that I teach people is how to listen at the level of the whisper.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't have to be, it's like, okay, well, maybe if you don't get the whisper, you get the tap on the shoulder, as opposed to the brick through the window, as opposed to the Mack truck, right? And that's exactly how it happens. And you can't avoid those lessons because they're part of your karmic contract.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love it. I love being on this adventure of surrender. I surrendered a couple years ago, like fully surrendered, where I'm use me for my highest good. Yeah. Right. And like really wake up in the morning and put me where I'm supposed to be today. And then I just follow my gut and my knowing. Yeah. It's gotten me into a lot of weird things that I never thought I would get into. But
that's
it's
just it.
But that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I know that. I see the impact that I'm making with people. And it's like, that's huge to me. That's everything to me. You know?
It's moving outside of your preferences and moving from like, I don't know why I'm doing this.
Yes.
But I'm gonna say yes, and I'm gonna listen, and this is like wildly uncomfortable for me, but okay, like whatever it is.
Lean into the discomfort for stuff. Have you ever read Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul?
Love that book. I actually give a lot of people that.
I do the same, right? So that's my Bible. My yoga mat is my church. So for me, I was raised religious, and so it turned me off completely because I thought religion and spirituality were the same things. Yeah. And so I always thought organized religion was such a crock of shit, still do, right? That just never resonated with me, and to whoever it does, excellent for you.
I think it's like just going to a yoga class doesn't like mean that somebody's living a yogic life. Yes. It's the same thing with religion.
100%. So to whoever uses that, that's excellent. For me, it did not, like to every fiber of my being, it felt like the wrong thing. But it pushed me away from spirituality because I really thought when I was younger that those went hand in hand instead of really understanding, So, it was about, I think 2016 for me where I was like, I was done with the rinse, lather, repeat. And I think it's very interesting. And then a couple of years ago, really understanding the full surrender of just whatever the universe has in store for you. It's not about me. I went and did an ayahuasca retreat and really fixed the whole ego situation that I ever had going on. It's crazy, right? Blows your mind. And so I find that to be completely fascinating. And then just to be on this path of surrender. So you're you're done with that. You get, and then you come back to the States, I'm assuming.
I came back to the States. I went back to work for a little while because I needed money, and it was the fastest kind of path back. Yeah. I had no idea what I was going to do, but it was also very interesting to kind of go back as like a non-competitive person. Sure. Like, I'm just here for a paycheck. Yeah. And
changes your perspective.
But what happened at the time though too is that I was really like my ethics and like what am I representing in doing this work on Wall Street, and I had been part of like. Just to give you a little insight into this, I used to recruit people who were doing like credit derivative trading and structured credit products. Yeah. Basically the people who blew up the world. Yeah. I did millions of dollars in salaries and contracts and fees and all kinds of things. And, there was a little bit of, these kind of things, but when I came back, I started working. One of my clients was MF Global. And I had just finished working on a deal moving a woman from Singapore to New York. And interestingly enough, on a Friday, my dad was like, Perri, he was a trader. And he was like, Perri, I think MF Global is about to go under. And I was like, get out of here. I'm like, Dad, I'm working with the top 2 guys in the firm. Right. I'm like, of course. I'm like, I don't think so. Sunday night, they were calling me saying, you need to get us out of here. And so I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this. Like, these banks are going under. Like, you know, like, I just moved this woman from Singapore. Now what?
Yeah.
You know, and I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I was still figuring it out. But it was interesting because when I was not working, you know, in these 2 years of doing nothing, there were times when I would actually just go learn new skills. Like, I would sit at Starbucks and learn new skills. And so one of the things that I learned was Twitter. Like, I was like, what is this Twitter thing?
Yeah.
So back in like 2008, 9, right?
Sure.
So I started on Twitter, and it was really kind of pivotal for me because I ended up meeting a lot of people in like the social media space very early. Mm-hmm. And then I started playing with all these Twitter apps, and then I started beta testing Twitter apps for tech companies. And anyway, I got kind of connected with a lot of people. And Twitter back then was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I actually have real world friends that I met on Twitter.
Wow.
Way back then. It's not what it is today.
Right. Yeah.
The
Things have
cesspool
changed.
that all of it is today.
Yeah.
But you know, back then you could really connect. So when I went back to New York, I actually got kind of hooked up into this tech scene because I knew these people. So I started going to like some of these meetups or parties and things like that. And I started connecting like startups with Wall Street people. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, you know, I know people, like, you want to look for some angel money, things like that. And I would sit in on some of these pitches and I would be like, I could do this. Like, you know, this is not interesting. Like,
Right.
you know, I was just sitting there being judgy. But it was like, okay, like, let me back into this. And then I had an idea, and then I ended up meeting this kid who was like the son of a billionaire. And he was working on like a number of different ideas. Mm-hmm. And we had lunch, and I was like, yeah, I have this idea. And he's like, I like that, you know? And then he was experimenting with it, and we kind of experimented with it with a couple of other people that were on his team. Mm-hmm. And we ended up founding a company called Unroll.me. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's an email unsubscribe engine.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we ended up founding this, and I didn't end up really working for the company ultimately, but like I helped them kind of, you know, design the idea. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, they did a lot of the execution, and then I did the marketing strategy to kind of kick it off and launch it. Yeah. And I created like basically like a viral hook in the product. I mean, whatever. It's not really important, but it was great, and it went, and you know, we had our first 1 million users. Nice. And it got press, and you know, and then I went on to start another company that did not go well. Yeah. But you know, that one ended up selling. Yeah. And it was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, but it took me out to California and Silicon Valley, and there was a whole other chapter out there.
I love it. Okay, so you do that, and then how do you transition from that into what you're doing now, and when did that happen, and how did that spark for you?
Yeah. Well, so when I was out there in San Francisco, mm-hmm. you know, this woman, I think we were out for my birthday, and this other tech founder that I know, I won't name her, but she was like, Perri, do you want to go to this pussy stroking class? And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like what? Like what? What are you talking about? Right. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, how does this exist? Like, how is this? I'm like, wait, what's happening at this class? But anyway, it was a class it was an intro to orgasmic meditation, which people may or may not heard of. There was a really salacious, mostly false Netflix documentary about this company. Okay. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I'll just say that, like, you know, I was around for a really long time, and I never saw anything that was
untoward,
illegal.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of ways that things were painted in a very Netflix style way. Right. Right. So anyway, because people, you know, have their opinions about that, but that practice changed my life in a really deep way, because I had done this awakening work, But the thing about, this is what happens to a lot of people with spiritual work, is that the ego loves to know what to do and to how to change behavior. And it loves to know ideas and have all this like mental understanding, but it's still the ego. And the thing that I have found is that, like, unless you really transform something deep in the body, it's not real transformation.
Agreed.
And so the practice really, it helped me start to embed and apply a lot of the spiritual teachings that I had learned. But it also helped me understand like my nature, right? So like I actually have a wildly feminine nature, like not feminine in the sense that society thinks, right? Because feminine in society, like people like to think is femininity.
Right.
But if you actually look at like people that they think are very feminine, it's very rigid and controlled. That's actually quite masculine.
Yes.
So it has the appearance of feminine. It has the appearance of femininity, which is an affectation that is acquired through an enormous amount of control and rigidity and like behavior modification. Because we like a certain kind of feminine.
Right.
Feminine to me is like raw, chaotic energy, raw power.
Yeah.
And it can be used for destruction or creation, but it's like a whirlwind, it's like a tornado, it's like a volcano. It's like, and I always had that energy. And so, but when you work in places, especially I worked in these male dominated industries, like you got to tighten that shit up. So in a way it was like destroying me, because it was like, okay, like my nature, and this goes back to the whole demonization of the feminine, and like you can go to all the religions about this, right? And it's like, okay, well, my nature must be bad because like I'm supposed to be like that and I'm like this.
Right.
And this is the messaging that so many women get. But I walked into this world and all of a sudden people were like, you've got the goods. I was like, what? I'm like, this thing that you got, like, I'm like, this is the thing that nobody wants.
Right. This thing that I've been trying to like close down.
This is the thing that's too much for everybody. That's like, I'm too big, I'm too loud, I'm too, I'm too expressive, I'm too whatever. And they were like, they were like, we love this. And it was really the first time in my life that I felt like, oh, okay.
And how old were you at that time? Just so that I can get a frame of reference.
32 or 3.
That's excellent.
2012. Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta do the math.
Yeah. Early
30s.
30s.
I'm 46.
Okay.
And I've never done anything to my
I love it.
But it was really life-changing for me, and it kind of helped continue, and I was still broke. I was a founder.
Yeah.
Right. But I was like just finding my way. And I was doing this practice, and I was part of this community, and I was just like, I don't know. I was just in it.
Yeah.
Right. I was running this startup, and I was trying to do that, and eventually I let that go too. Like there were just things that I just couldn't. I don't think I could have done it any better at the time. Like when I look back, I'm like, oh wow, these are all the ways that I missed it. Yeah. Right. Like these are the things that were in the way of that being successful.
Yeah.
But it was a very good learning lesson. And one of the most important things about that was actually being a non-technical founder, having to speak to engineers, because it was a very important skill that I needed to be able to do the work I do today. And that was like the training of being able to express a vision or a felt sense in a language that could be heard in the masculine world. Like it almost feels like, to me, there's two worlds. Right? There's like this masculine world, and then there's like the feminine world. And they don't speak very well.
Yeah.
And I believe like it's actually women's responsibility to translate. that felt sense. And it's one of the skills that I think that has not been passed down.
Yeah.
It's like something that needs to be passed down.
Agreed.
And so I have a lot of like what I would call like very ancient codes, you know, like there's just like things that I am here to do or bring back, or I don't know how to explain it other than that. But like there's a translation that's emerging in the world right now among, you know, the women that are here to bring this. And it's kind of reseeding consciousness with things that have been lost for a very long time. And so this was important, right? To be able to speak both languages.
Yeah.
And it was an important skill. And then in 2015, I met my husband in this community. And then we moved to Arizona in 2016, got married, had a baby. And so I was, at that time the transition was, startup wasn't working. I was doing consulting. And then what it felt like was, and this happens on the journey, it felt like all the back doors that I had just felt like they were closing. Like the universe was like, I don't want you doing recruitment consulting anymore.
Right. You don't have any more plan Bs.
You don't have any more plan Bs. Yeah. Like this company that was about to hire you didn't get their funding. Like it was just like random shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? And at that time, I had about 1 month rent or like, you know, expenses. And my now husband said to me, he was like, why don't you build a digital course? Because I also, before him, I really had a problem with relationships. Like I was a love addict. I never dated well. Like I just felt like, you know, it was something that was so important to me. I was adopted. Like there were just all of these things that really had me, like I really wanted a relationship. Yeah. And I wanted to get married and all of that. And I sucked at it. Yeah. And so I had to do a lot of deep inner work in order to become the person to like meet my husband. Yeah. And so basically I turned that into a program. And, you know, that's 10 years ago. Yeah. So he said to me, you know, why don't you turn this into a digital course? And I was like, no. I was like, this is transformative. I'm like, you can't do this online. Yeah. What are you talking about? Yeah. And he was like, try it. And I had 1 month of money left, so I just went for it.
I love that.
And I built this course, which is now, I rebranded it last year, called Labyrinth of Love. And it's like, you know, just really like understanding your own patterns, like who you are in relationship. And I started that, and I think the first year I launched it like 9 times. And so I'm coaching people, and I had gone through coaching certification. So during that time that I was like doing my startup, I was in this program that was really like for me, but it was also a certification program. And so finally I just did my hours, but I did them all for free. Yeah. Like I was just like, I'm not really a coach. I'm a tech CEO, I'll do this practice and I'll do this for free. So I did like 300 hours for free or something. And so then I started doing these groups, and then, you know, everybody was like, okay, Perri, we're good on love. Let's talk about business. And I was like, okay, great. Let's talk about business. I'll teach you business. And then it went from that. And then things started to like really open into other things, right? Like then the magic really started to kind of turn on. And in 2020, I was like, okay, we have to add pussy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But instead of a partnered practice, which is what I came from, I created a solo practice for women, which I think is really important, because I know that like there are a lot of women that couldn't have shown up to the class that I went to. I won't get into all of it, but like and in my experience now, having worked with this for, you know, I'm going into 5 years, there is a huge chasm for so many women between like them and their pussy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, walking into a class to do a partnered practice is actually too much for a lot of people.
Right.
And we were also in the middle of the pandemic, and it was all like online. And so what I started was this, solo stroking practice to a guided meditation, right? So there is something about it where it's not like, the principles of it are not like it's not about getting off, right? It's not about climactic orgasm.
Right.
It's about like being with the connection to the sensation in your body. And I will tell you something. Women who think they are good at sex come to my practice and they are humbled because there are channels that we learn how to be good at that are not necessarily like the deepest, truest thing.
Right.
And so what I have learned in doing this over the years is that what your relationship is with your pussy and what's happening in your pussy, the energy, and how that energy relates to the rest of your body is literally a map of your life. Like I can literally, if you tell me what it's like, what your relationship with your pussy is like, I will tell you about the patterns that are in your life. It's like, it's a little bit like pussy fortune telling.
Oh my God, I'm so happy right now.
But the best part of that is that, because sometimes people come to me and they're like, I have this thing and it keeps happening and I don't know why. And, people try and solve problems like up here at the story level and whatever. And I'm like, let's just get down to the energetic root of what is happening. And what's interesting is homeopathy does this too, right? So if you know anything about homeopathy, people think it's, my husband's always like, oh, what are you giving me? You're giving me nothing with nothing. Okay, great. That's going to do so much. But I love homeopathy because I'm very energetically sensitive.
Yeah.
And so when you address something like at a root energetic, right, you begin to see the changes in your life without having to it just happens. Yeah. And it's not this behavior modification.
Right.
And that's what I see happen so much is that people use their life force to be like, I don't want to be like that. So I want to be like that. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to mimic that. I'm going to emulate that. I'm going to work really hard and put all this discipline in to be this idea of this person. And then people hope that their neurological grooves that they create and the habits that they create are going to make that true. Still not true.
Yeah.
So, and those people, by the way, the ones that use a lot of discipline, and really hardcore gripping, they're the ones that have the most catastrophic failures.
Right.
Because what happens is that, I look at it as like building sandcastles while the tide is out. And it's like, you can do that all day long. And the truth is coming home to roost. And so for me, I'm actually in this strange cocoon phase again because we had toxic mold in our house 2 years ago and it really knocked me out. And physically, I am, not where I was and all of this. And I gained all this weight and, and I can't move it yet. Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of people would be like, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Right. And I'm like, actually, no, this is trying to take me somewhere. It's trying to take me down further. It's trying to take me internal. It's trying to let me open to something else. And so when you learn how to work the feminine map, you don't use grit to climb out of the hole. Yeah. No, you die in the hole. Yeah. Not literally. Yeah. But you die in the hole and you let yourself compost. Yeah. And then in that composting process, you soften and you open, and then, you come to someone like me to teach you how to live in that land, right? It's a different world. Yeah. But I was saying to my husband yesterday, I was like, the last 2 years have been so fucking hard. Yeah. but I'm actually happier than I've ever been.
Yes.
Like I'm happy and I'm unhappy at the same time. Yeah. Like, does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because I find that like the things that I have to go through, and the same thing, like I love how you described that as far as just really softening into that and understanding that that's an important part of the process instead of just gritting, like trying to grit out of something.
Totally.
Because the universe is putting you exactly where you need to be, whatever it took to get you to that point. And so I understand exactly what you're talking about. And there's periods of time for myself also where I'm going through things where I'm like, what the fuck is this supposed to be teaching me or what, because it's hard shit.
It is hard. It is hard. And so, when I work with people, I am always trying to help them. The way I relate to the world very much is like kind of like a holograph, like a game. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking for the symbolism. And so like some of the health stuff I've had to go through, I'm like, okay, like this is actually the purging of like a lifetime of that. And it's actually clearing, right? So it's not like I'm actually it's like I have to get worse to get better, right? And there were things, in the mold, like one of the things that I did to really get through the mold layer of it, other than go through my house, was I had to really look at like the representation of like the dark, toxic feminine and like all like relationships with women or my mom or like things like that felt toxic.
Yeah.
And in myself, right? And it was like I actually took a whole week and I gave myself a solo retreat. I said to my husband, I was like, I have to do this or I'm not going to heal. Yeah. I was like, I this isn't just medical. Like I have to work the energetics of this. Mm-hmm. And that's when that started to lift, right? And then there are other layers that I'm working on now. And what's interesting is that I didn't have the skills to be this patient before this happened because I was actually really blessed with good health and I didn't have a lot of challenges and I never broke a bone and like, you know what I mean? Like I was very blessed. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that the universe only gives you what you can handle. So I was really lucky with this to not be as sick as many other people do. And I believe that's because of the work I do and that fact that I'm like in the field and of service, they kind of like gave me a taste and is like, can you hear the medicine here? Like, do you need to be incapacitated? I was like, no.
Right.
I was like, no.
I'm answering the door. Please stop.
I got it. Yeah. I'm like, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't give me any more.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. But taking the mold out of my house was one of the most insane teachers that I've ever had. It was intricate as fuck. And I had to use my intuition throughout the whole process. And I kept like, being like, guys, I think we need, because I had just redone my house. I'm just going to tell you, redid my house, moved in, got sick immediately. I was like, what is going on? I thought it was me. But then my daughter had a cough and I was like, okay, it's the house. Right. My doctor was like, I don't think it's mold. I'm like, I think it's mold. And then it was mold. But then it was like, where is the mold? I can't see any mold. I can't smell. So I literally had to use like my energetic intuition. Obviously, we brought in a tester. Sure. But like him and our remediator were like, you are like no one we've ever worked with. I found every hidden piece of mold in the house through my intuition, through my senses, through just like, I think it's here. Mm-hmm. And they would open up a wall and lo and behold, I mean, it was horrific what was in my house.
Yeah.
Every single bathroom had to be ripped out. There was like a mat of black mold inside in the wall. I mean, like, you would not believe what was in this house. And then there were like other crazy things after that. Like they didn't seal a toilet properly. So my house was testing high for endotoxins. And like, there was all of this stuff. And I was like, but it was layer by layer, piece by piece, intuition by intuition. It was not linear. It was not an easy fix. It was like something that required like a lot of staying with it. Yeah. And I was like, this is exactly the training that I needed.
Yeah.
To be able to be with my body.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff that it kicked off.
Sure.
Not linear.
Right.
No one has a cure. There's no fix. Every single person has to do it differently. Like, and so no doctor has the answer. Like, I'm working with 4 different doctors. I basically hear each one of them, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take all of that in, and I'm like, I agree with you, I don't agree with you. That feels right. Let me try this.
Yeah, what resonates with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was like this radical responsibility for leveraging experts, but also following my own intuition and like working piece by piece and not expecting some magic fucking pill.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this has been like shamanic for me.
Yeah. And this was just 2 years ago?
Yeah, this happened. Well, what's interesting is, so ultimately they found that I had some other Lyme-related stuff, which I wouldn't have found if I didn't have the mold. I have like one of the co-infections. And I had those symptoms for years and no one knew what it was. So I just, the thing about me doing this work too is that like I can feel literally everything in my body. Yeah. I am so in this body. My senses, the sensations, like I can feel everything. And so a lot of times I'm like, I don't know, is that energetic? Is it emotional? Is it spiritual? Is it physical? I'm like, sometimes I can't actually tell.
Right.
And there's a lot of mystery too, in the sense that a lot of times I can't pin it down.
Yeah.
I just can't pin it down. And so it's funny because it doesn't actually let me know it's absolutely this.
Sure.
But so I probably had these symptoms that I was just functioning with. But this is why I say it's like a healing crisis, because it all came to a head and it unveiled it for me. And it was like, here you go.
Yeah.
This is what you need to address.
Yeah.
And so now I at least know where I am on the map.
Right.
But yeah, it happened. We moved into that house in July of 2022. And last year we moved 30 times with 5, she was 5. I had a 5-year-old, 2 dogs, running a company. Not well.
Right.
Like mold messes with your brain.
Yeah.
And we moved 30 times.
Wow. It's a big deal.
Wild.
Right. Outrageous.
But somehow I still had my biggest year in my business.
Yeah. Well, and also like if your eyes are open and you're going down the path that you're supposed to be and willing to lean in and do the work and, all of the things, it just makes you a better person for whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing.
Totally.
So,
well, and that's just it. It's like we're being, we are being trained in a particular skill set that comes from whatever challenge that we're doing. And I will also say that like it gave me a whole other level of compassion.
Yeah.
Because I just had never experienced anything like that physically humbling before.
Yeah.
And it took me to like another level of like softness and heart opening and like compassion and like approval, and not only approval for like where I am, but like deeper approval for where everyone else is.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to teach that. And approval is a very big, important aspect of spirituality.
Yeah.
Really.
Why do you think so when you do the pussy stroking classes, are they individual classes, group classes, online stuff? Tell me the format.
Basically, like the format is usually like that I will do an online class.
Okay.
I do have some events that I do in person.
Okay.
But those people have been doing it for a while, so they're like prepared for that level of energy.
Sure.
The online, right, I teach a little bit and then I take people through a practice and they usually just kind of share afterwards, whatever.
Sure.
But then I have a library.
Yeah.
Right, so people are practicing all the time and they go through the library of the practices. And then I teach other programs too, but the practice is kind of at the core of all the different topics that I teach.
Okay. What is your ideal client, or how does someone come to you? Is it someone who's like, I always think about like religious trauma, right? Because that's very much like you're not supposed to masturbate, like that you're going to hell if you do all of that shit. So that feels to me like someone who really could use your help. But like, what is your ideal client, or how do they come to you?
Well, so I kind of take this spiritual perspective of like, I don't have like a traditional marketing in the sense of like, I don't niche, because I believe in frequency and resonance. So like, meaning I'm like a tuning fork, like I have a particular resonance, and that I trust that frequency to call the people that are meant to have this turned on inside of them.
Yes.
Because that's how we wake each other up, right? It's like a network of frequency.
Yeah.
And so I, for people who come to me, they usually feel something. Mm-hmm. So they see me, they're like, oh my God, I either love her or hate her. Mm-hmm. It's usually not neutral.
Right, I'm the same way.
So there's people who like, look, there are people who blocked me for 2 years and then like came back and was like, actually, I want to work with her and I want to dive in.
Yeah.
And I'm not as, this mold thing has actually softened me so much. I'm not as difficult. Like I used to be much more spiky.
Yeah.
And people really like that, but that's kind of gone now.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, about the religious trauma. So I previously, I would say people who were more in the deeper feminine spirituality journey already were the people who came to me.
Okay.
This year, I created a framework called the Pussy Map, which was like a whole onboarding to be able to do my practice sex bomb. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that I created it, we're actually running it for the first time right now. The reason why I created the Pussy Map is just for this. Mm-hmm. A woman who had religious trauma of like never touching her pussy, she's not necessarily going to be ready to just jump into a practice. Right. There's like a whole thing, right? So what I did was I created a framework that I'm also going to be certifying people in to be able to work with people in order to ramp up to doing the practice and all of the philosophy about the practice, and then how to like work with the practice in your life. Right. So those people, the way that I say to people is always like, if I resonate with you, like if what I'm sharing resonates, then dive in.
Yeah.
Right. Because there are many different, sex bomb's kind of at the center, and then I have all these spokes, right? Like, so I teach about relationships, I teach about abundance, I teach about energy, and then I teach the different topics as they relate. And so I really teach people how to work with energy and understand the laws of energy, and then how to live with that knowledge.
Okay.
So
what is the sex bomb? That's the
meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's pronounced sex bomb, but I spelled it XSXBMB.
Got it.
Because the internet is a fucker, and I had to be strategic.
I love it. Okay.
Right? So like, it's not getting flagged by Instagram.
Okay. So the sex bomb is the actual orgasmic meditation.
No, orgasmic meditation is a partnered practice, separate thing. This is sex bomb is a solo guided meditation.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then so it's like I'm from that lineage. Yeah. Like I'm from that lineage of orgasmic meditation.
Yeah.
But this is a totally different practice.
Prior to you getting involved in San Francisco and the stuff that you said that you got involved in, how would you describe your relationship with your pussy? If you're willing to share that, like,
I always had a relationship with my pussy.
Okay.
And so, it's funny because I did a reel recently, and it was like 5 ways to know that you're like an ancient priestess. Okay. And like women who have always had a relationship with their pussy, like a lot of sex, like just sex was always easy for me. Like people have, really powerful experiences with you. If you, you kind of have these priestessy codes.
Yeah.
So sexuality was really easy for me. But when I started my, orgasmic meditation practice, the thing is that you change the way you relate to your pussy. Right? So it's not an extractive relationship of like, I just want to get off.
Yeah.
Right? It becomes more of a like cultivating, nurturing, and nurturing the energy, not just like blowing the energy.
Yeah. It feels very, power of now type situation, right? Where you're
Totally.
very present and very all of the things.
But with your pussy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a fucking treat.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it really blows people's minds because the power of it, the radical transformation that people experience just from having this relationship with their pussy.
Yeah.
It changes everything. Like really. Like it talk about let's get naked.
Yeah.
It really strips things that are not true, things that people are holding on to, things that were stuck and couldn't move. Like it really just absolutely activates, and it helps women stay in their bodies as opposed to their minds.
Yes.
Nothing good comes from this.
That's totally true. I believe that 1,000%.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we work on getting out of our minds, right? I work with that all the time, not necessarily with the pussy, but with other things in life of just the mind is a fucker.
Yeah.
Right. And it
like
runs rampant.
And so like a computer program. And so if your mind wasn't programmed well, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to kind of reclaim it. Michael Singer talks about that in Untethered Soul. It's like a naughty roommate that won't shut up.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I also believe that masculine spirituality is very transcendent. It's very like up and above the mind. You even hear Michael Singer talk about his meditations. He's like hovering outside of his body, witnessing and watching. And it's great to be an observer. It's great to have the observer consciousness so that you are not your mind. You're not your behavior. You're not your experience. But I believe, and this is feminine spirituality, is you are here to bring your soul deeply into your body, like where your consciousness is driving this vehicle, this vessel. And in order to do that, you also need to clear out the vessel.
Yeah, you have to make room for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of what this practice does. So, but, going back to this question that you asked me, about my own journey with pussy, one of the things that blew my mind and why I just created the pussy map, which is the framework to teach it, was because I had just like been offering classes and like, having people come and like, to talk for 15 minutes and then like, hey, let's do the practice.
Sure.
I was in my Hawaii retreat last year and 3 of the women that were there were like, yeah, Perri, I never touched my pussy until I did Sex Bomb. And I was like, what? Yeah. Like, what do you, like, meaning I always had a good relationship with my pussy.
Yeah.
That never occurred to me.
Right. That there's a lot of women out there that are like that.
Right. And so what I realized was like, okay, I need to really create a ramp.
I think that's smart.
Right. So that, and also a certification, because I think that some of this needs to be done one-to-one. Yeah. Like I have a lot of women who work with, because I teach teachers as well. Yeah. And I have a lot of women who work with people and they're like, I need to be able to do this with them because they need this. Right. If anyone has ever gone to therapy, like people are just talking, you could spend 10 years like I did, just fucking talking and nothing changing.
Therapy treadmill,
yeah. Because all it is your ego is just like blah, 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 blah. Yeah. That doesn't create transformation. It's in the body.
Agreed.
So, it's exciting. I feel like this is emerging to another level now and hopefully like we can bring this to more women in the world. I really believe in it. And this is another thing, like I never wanted to teach pussy. Right. I was like, I wanted to be a tech CEO. Right. And like all of a sudden I'm on a podcast and we're talking about my pussy and like, and I'm like, wow, this is really outside of my preferences. But sure, I've had to actually step into it because it's really of service.
I agreed.
And my soul is like, look, I kicked your ass for how many years and you have all these skills and you can go out there and talk about this stuff and not worry about it and what people think of you, right. Or, and I just know that whatever discomfort I might have is worth it because I see the results in the lives of the women that work with me.
I agree with you 1,000%. And I think it takes a real badass to be willing to talk about all of the things. I really do. I think that's people that come and sit on the couch here and have the conversations and talk about the hard things and the shit that, you know, they've gone through and what makes them who they are and things that they bring. I mean, you are definitely of service in bringing this, and that is where the impact is. And so,
and I thank you for having me too, because, you know, it's having opportunities to have conversations like this.
Absolutely.
That, you know, a woman may hear this and say like, wow, like, and that could change her whole life.
Absolutely. And she can figure out more and, you know, how to dive into all of that. So, well, thank you so much for coming and spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of our time, so we're going to wrap it up. If you have questions or suggestions, send us an email. Our email address is ladies@letsgetnakedpodcast.com. We will have Perri's links to her website and all of her socials so that you can figure out more information on pussy stroking and the pussy map. It's exciting. Exciting work. Please do all the things to support the podcast. Follow, share, rate, review, and catch you next time. That's a wrap.
I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.